So thank you for joining this morning. This is CertaPay's coffee break number 2. We're going to talk about managing time and performance of the remote workforce. I am Rachel Camella from CertaPay's HR team, and I'm here with Cindy Merkel and Janet Lang today, and we will answer your questions and help guide you through managing a remote workforce. I am drinking a Riqueza from Latin America. It is a dark blend, and I made an Americano. It is delicious. So I hope you all have your coffee on hand as we go through the remote workforce. So why would we consider a remote workforce? Well, some of the obvious things, of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so it's been forced on us in a lot of ways. But I want to back up from there because we were headed this way anyway. We have, before the pandemic, we had close to 18% of our force in the United States working remotely. And so now we've gone immediately into this huge percentage of people working remotely. And by the trend before the pandemic, we were going to be at about 50% remote workforce by 2025 anyway. So we just got there faster, that's all. And so why would we do that? Well, there are a lot of studies that show productivity increases. And there's a learning curve for that. We're going to talk a little bit more about it because some people might think, well, it's harder, the productivity will drop, you can't, how do I manage this, what do I do? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Retention. A lot of the studies show there are tremendous benefits with regards to retention because that's one of the most expensive things that we have to deal with in the workplace is turnover and retention. They're extremely expensive. And if we can reduce our turnover by giving people some more flexibility, then we reduce huge numbers of expenses. It also expands your options. So now you're not tied to just finding an employee in your local area. Now you can find the best employees across the country and world, possibly. So now you have options for employees for your positions from all over the place, which you may not have had before. The cost savings, again, another place where we've seen some tremendous cost savings, and a lot of the studies are showing billions of dollars. And these dollars come from savings for businesses such as real estate, insurance, fixed expenses like the electric bill, even the change in absenteeism and turnover, and then cost savings on a national productivity level. So the man hours are actually increased, something we're going to talk about again. And then employee cost savings, so gas, commute time, childcare, clothing, all of these pieces realized into a huge cost savings number. And there's one study recently that I read where it showed nearly $700 billion in savings if we have 50% of our workforce working remotely. So these are big numbers, and it's a good reason to shift to a remote workforce or keep your employees working remotely at this point, or as many as you can. Also, the health of the employees, both mentally and physically. So when you have employees who are working remotely, they aren't as stressed. They are physically stronger and even reducing illness because you don't have people who come into the office with even just a typical cold, and that would normally get spread through your office. So 6 people in your office end up with the same common cold. That's going to be reduced. So the health of your employees will be improved. And this goes back to some of the other things on this why list where we talk about retention and turnover and absenteeism and cost savings. Now you've got a more productive team and a healthier team. So what are the challenges? Well, we talked about a couple, whoa, hold on. We're having a technical situation. I will get through this in just a second. Okay, so we talked about some of these issues last week in our coffee break. You want to create policies and procedures and follow them. And also take a look at your job descriptions. Having somebody work remotely may change the way you have your job description written. So be mindful of that. And take a look at some of those pieces in there that you might need to change. Maybe you need to redo the entire thing, and that's okay. But pay attention to it. Make sure you're aware of those changes and take care of them accordingly. So the real things that we're going to take a look at are the time, performance, engagement, and morale. And these are the places that you may have some challenges, but once you get through it and you get through that learning curve, it really will make a big difference. Let's start in with time. Change your thinking on time and think about it in terms of work instead of time. And you have a certain amount of work that needs to occur in the day, in the week, in the quarter, whatever it is. And so manage the work and think less and less about actual time. You do know that you want to have about 8 hours of work and whatnot, but think more about the productivity piece and the actual work that's getting done instead of the time in the day. And so that gives you the expansion of the day. So now it's not an 8 to 5 day anymore. It's just 8 hours in the day. Where are they? Does it really matter? If you have specific hours, it does. And you have somebody that has to manage phones or customer service or whatever it is within certain time frames, yes, that matters. But also, the work can get done at any time. This goes back to your employees being more productive and healthy because everybody has a different rhythm. And so it might make sense for somebody to wake up and clock in and begin their day at 6 a.m., where they're very productive and accomplish a lot. But maybe they need to stop working at 8 and go drop a child off at school or walk the dog or do some different things in their day. And then they immediately return back to their work setting. And that's okay because you're thinking in terms of the work and not necessarily the time. And so for an exempt employee, it's easy. Your exempt employees are working and doing tasks. And for your non-exempt employees, you want to actually track that time so you know what their day looks like and how the hours look. And if they clock in and do a couple hours, clock out, come back, clock in, it should be okay because you're getting a total number of hours and you're getting work accomplished in that time. So take a look at your timekeeping mechanisms. Do you have an easy way for them to track time? The Department of Labor still requires us to pay all hours worked when somebody is a non-exempt hourly employee. So you want to be mindful of that. Make it easy to do the time tracking. Make sure they can log into their computer and clock in, use their smartphone as a timekeeping device, have some project management tools with time tracking. Be very mindful about having some electronic timekeeping piece that's easy to use. And that gives the employee, that hourly employee, a lot of freedom. They're going to get the 8 hours in or whatever their scheduled amount of time is. They will get it in that time and they can monitor that easily. And you're going to know that that time is getting done because you see the work. And so shift your thinking to managing the work. There's a lot of studies that show remote workers actually work 4 hours more in a week than their in-office counterparts. And again, we talk about a learning curve. So a lot of that comes from you, the business owner, the leaders, the managers and directors. You have to understand how to think about the shift from time to work and understand how to manage that and deal with that. And it should also save you time as well. And initially, there may be a little bit of extra time you have to spend on the front side in learning and coaching and getting your team to understand how to work in a remote environment. But in the long run, you will be saving all those hours. So it makes your time more efficient as well. So let's talk about performance when we talk about the same thing. And when you create those job descriptions and those policies and procedures, that's your guide, and that will help you with the performance management piece of this. Having clear expectations is very important. And when you have people, especially a new remote worker, so somebody who's used to being in the office and now they're working remotely, this is where you might have a learning curve from your employees, because they may not understand, how do I manage my time when I'm at home? I don't know how to start my day. We've helped some clients already who have these similar situations, and it comes from setting the expectations. So when you change that job description, or you have policies in place and you create some clear expectations of how the day should look and how the week should look, then it's easier for your remote workers to figure out how to manage their own time within those parameters. Create and establish set schedules. It makes it easier for somebody to get accustomed to working from home. So maybe you add in a morning check-in, and it doesn't have to be all on you, the manager, but maybe you are creating some separate work groups, and those work groups have check-in times established in the day. So this will help manage the performance and the expectations. If you start the day with, okay, here's what I want to accomplish today, and there's accountability, there's a good chance that's all going to fall in line. Add in some different pieces. You know, another thing that comes out of the mix, which is a huge positive, is you don't lose all that time from the individual gets up from their desk and goes down the hall to the restroom, and on the way back they stop and speak to a coworker for 15 minutes. Well, you've gained all those minutes back from that individual employee. They don't have those typical office distractions. People aren't sitting at the water cooler, so to speak, for 30 to 45 minutes. And so those kinds of things are back in the savings, the time savings and the productivity savings, because they go back into the actual work that's getting done. But in addition, you don't have things like not so much office politics, but office pettiness. So somebody isn't going to be upset or offended because they didn't get included in something in the office. Everybody's kind of in the same boat. So there's a twofold there. One, that's a benefit because you don't have those distractions. But two, it's a negative because those are social pieces that people do need. And so this is a place where you can add some of those pieces back in, have video lunches together, create a daily discussion topic, create places where you can have that water cooler chat in a controlled environment so that you know how much time that takes and how it benefits the team. So it's an important piece to kind of plug in there. It will help the overall performance of your employee, team, group, organization. One thing that's very, very important we've found with remote workers is having a one-on-one meeting. And again, have it as a set time, a set schedule. Maybe it's daily. I think a one-on-one daily is probably a little much, but you may know of certain employees that require that. You know your team, you know when you need to add that in. But a weekly one-on-one or every other week or quarterly, however that matters. But one thing that's really, really important is don't ever cancel it. These are critical meetings, and canceling a one-on-one for a remote worker actually sends the message that it wasn't that important. So if you had to cancel it for some reason, that message to the employee is that whatever else you had to do is more important than they are. So it's very important not to cancel a one-on-one. And you may have situations where you have to change the time, but keep it as close to that time as possible. And the one-on-one is a great time to review performance, talk about the goals, talk about what's happening, and keep that employee engaged and on task. How we doing? Good so far?
You're good. Keep going.
All right. So provide several different methods of communication. Don't just use phone and email. Add in any possible layer you can. Group chats, video meetings, instant messaging. I know that Wayfair added in an instant messaging component so that all of the remote workers can communicate with each other in a quick click of a button. So any format for adding communication is a very important tool. As I said in the time discussion, focus on the goals approach to the work and for the team. And if you start big with the approach of what is our goal for the entire company, and then break it down. Each department has goals that help move that main goal forward. And within that department, you might have teams working on specific projects. And if each team has goals within it to help that project succeed, it's important to focus on those goals. All of the time will fall in place when you're focused on the work and on the goals. And then that keeps your employees engaged, that improves the performance, and then you're all working toward the same goals. So of course, you still might have times where you have performance issues and you have to help one person more than another. And a performance improvement plan doesn't change. Being a manager doesn't change. You still want to have conversations and discussions about performance improvement. And if you have to do a performance improvement plan with somebody, it's the same format. You want to have the discussions and write it up and go through the information and establish goals that will have to happen in terms of somebody's performance with an improvement plan. So those kinds of things stay in place. So engagement and morale can be an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind, it fixed itself. Your screen was messed up. We're good. Go ahead.
I was just about to adjust. Is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So the engagement and morale piece is really important because you want to keep your employees engaged. Engaged employees don't leave. And the other thing that we've learned in our studies about a remote workforce is that remote workers are more engaged and less likely to leave. So this is an important place to pay attention. You want to add as much face time as you can. Video meetings are a great way to do that. Add trainings, supervision, create different types of task force and groups within so that people are working with other people on a regular basis, shifting around on different projects. It's always good to add all these types of layers, and that keeps your team engaged. And when they're engaged, the morale is higher. So make sure the employees have access to everything they need to do their job. And if somebody cannot access information or does not have the tools they need, then this is what happens. They become disengaged. So pay attention to that. Make sure there's a layer of transparency so the employees can say, hey, I'm working on this project, but I can't get these graphs that I need. Can you help me? Make sure your employees have all of the information they need to do their jobs properly. And this goes back to the job description. You want to have everything listed in there. All the tools that they need to complete their job should be clear and carved out so that everybody's on the same page. Have discussions about distractions. We know that especially initially when somebody is learning to work from home, they may have more distractions until they figure out how to manage their own day and their space. And oftentimes having the conversation will make a difference. So you want to set up a private environment for where you're going to set up your computer and your meetings. You want to minimize the amount of people who can disrupt you during your working times, and have the conversation with your team. Distractions are going to happen. It's not different in the office. You have the same kinds of things. Like I said, somebody walks down the hall in front of your office and they're heading to another meeting or to the restroom or to somewhere, and they stop and distract you from what you're doing. The same distractions do occur at home, so have conversations about them. And at home, even distractions are potentially less, depending on what your situation is. But it's important to talk about it and figure out a plan and how to minimize those. Daily check-ins are a great way to just have a touch with the individual employees every day. And I'm not saying that each manager has to be the one doing the check-in, but a check-in in some format. So again, figure out what makes sense for your team. Maybe you have the check-in each morning with the whole team. Maybe you have different things set up with particular groups, but having some kind of a daily check-in is important when you're talking about the engagement piece and keeping the morale up. As I said before, add in any possible communication method option available, and even listen to what the employees say. They will find other methods along the way, and don't be afraid to add in extra types of communication means. Add in webinars, trainings, task different people with doing trainings for other members of the team, or have people attend different webinars and then come back and share what they've learned. There are a lot of ways to add communication to the daily schedule. Create social interactions. We talked about this too, and any type of social interaction, a lot of it we're taking out when we're removing the office environment. So add it back in a way that makes sense. Create contests or group goals or special projects, any place that you can add social interaction. We need this. We need this just as human nature. These are pieces that keep us connected and keep us engaged. Same goal in the end. You want to retain your employees. You want to save those turnover dollars. Keeping your employees engaged is the best way to do that. I see some questions pop in.
Actually, it was just Laura. She was thanking us for being here again, and we appreciate you too, Laura. If anybody has any questions, you can either write them in the chat and I can read them, or I don't know, Rachel, if you want to open it up.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of summarize all of this, and I think a lot of people may have been concerned when we got pushed to have a remote workforce. But what I want to say is don't be afraid to keep as many of your team members working remotely as possible. There's so many pluses. Just the cost savings alone can be a huge boost to your business. And when you look at, you add the cost savings, you add the health savings, and then you add the turnover savings. These are really big numbers. And so if at all possible, we know that there are industries out there where the people absolutely must go to the office or to the environment, distribution, manufacturing, restaurants. There are a lot of examples. But within those industries, you might even have individual jobs that can exclusively be a remote position. And it's written in the job description. So don't be afraid to create jobs from the jobs you already have that are now going to be remote positions. It will have so many pluses for you long term, and the overall employee morale will go up because you've got these people that are so much more productive than they were. Our studies show, like I said, it's an average of a 4-hour difference per employee per week. So when you add back the productivity in dollars, it really makes sense to consider this as a long-term setup for your business. So we'd love to hear your questions and help you out with any of that. Let us know.
Okay, Rach, I got one for you. Ready?
Yep.
If worker is remoting into office computer from their home computer, should we still be providing an allowance for them even though they are using their own computer? This is optional too, so they can still go to the office next month or decide to work from home. Well, if they're remoting in into the office computer from the, so they're remoting in to your network from their personal computer, basically. Okay, Rach, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So that's a great question, and something that we kind of touched on last week when we talked about setting up structurally. How do you set this up? And so your employee has to have cell phone capabilities and internet capabilities. So you might consider just adding a stipend or an allowance that would be used for internet access, and maybe you even provide them with a laptop or whatever it is. So it's kind of up to you, but you want to establish a policy for that and have that clear and uniform across the board so that anybody in that position gets the same advantage. If it's a laptop or a stipend toward the internet access and the cell phone usage, whatever it is, but think that through and make sure that it's fair across the board for all the same employees in the position, in the particular positions. And the other thing, of course, I just want to touch on, of course, is the security piece. Whenever you have people using their own equipment to access your company's main information source, you want to be careful about the securities and the parameters. So that's something to think of when somebody is using their own device, as opposed to you provide them with a company laptop that has limits on access. So when you've got somebody accessing your company's main server from their own device, you're opening up potential risks. So those are just things to think about, and something we talked about last week in setting up policies and procedures with the remote equipment.
And the question that came from was Amanda. And yes, Amanda, the VPN is obviously the most secure way to go with that for sure. Yeah. So that's good. I do have another question.
And if they are logging in through the VPN, you're setting up a nice secure environment. But again, if it's their own device, if they've logged in to some type of malware or virus on their device, and then they log into your VPN, the VPN doesn't prevent that virus from traveling through. So be aware of that. Now, if it's a company provided laptop, you can set up limits and parameters so that that can't happen. Just something to think about.
Okay, Rachel, as far as an exempt worker, does the employee have to be supervising others? Would seem to me it's easier for time monitoring for exempt workers to work remote, less clocking in and out. So I guess we'll need to define what an exempt worker is from a remote perspective.
So the exempt classifications do not change because somebody is working from home. That would be, working from home is a piece of a particular job, but exempt classifications stay the same. The first thing you want to look at is, do they meet the minimum salary threshold? And the next thing is, do they manage at least 2 people? And that's the same, whether they are remote or they manage remote workers, it doesn't matter. Do they at least manage 2 people? And then the next thing from there you're looking at is the actual job task. So are they mainly performing managerial duties, decision-making duties, or are they actually doing the tasks themselves? So those questions for the FLSA classifications are still the same for classifying exempt and non-exempt, and it doesn't change because it's remote, but you want to be clear about which positions have remote capabilities.
That is all the questions I see. Does anyone have anything else?
So you guys are welcome to reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns or something that we didn't get to today. And also, if you have a topic or an idea that you would like us to cover in one of our coffee breaks, please send it over. We will add it into the schedule. And join us next week for our 3rd coffee break, Workplace Safety in the Age of Coronavirus. So we are so happy you all joined us today, and we wish you all a fantastic week. Thank you very much.
Rachel, can you leave it open for a minute for emails for me, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Everybody have a wonderful weekend.